part of my homemade philosophy is like, you have to fail to succeed. You really have to fail. Learn how to fail really quickly and bounce up again and start over. There is something like to be learned from every experience. So when I think about my path, I have failed many, many times. And
welcome back to the Empowered Woman, Badass and Unfiltered podcast. Today, I have Kristina Snyder, and she has been an entrepreneur for over 20 years. She is the CEO of SNYDER, and she uses her creativity to represent artists, illustrators, animators, and visual artists from around the world. We're going to go into her story. She's originally from Sweden, and she's lived in the United States for over a couple decades. And after all that, we're just gonna go through the journey of her life and really seeing how we can use creativity in our everyday lives as well to create the lives that really fulfill us. So Kristina, I'm just so happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Olivia. It's great to be here. And thank you for inviting me. I really look forward to this conversation with you.
Absolutely. And guys, as always, her links are in the show notes below. If you're watching this on YouTube, they are in the description box below. So let's first start off with like when you first, your early life in Sweden and then moving over to New York.
Yes, that's a long story, but I'll make it brief. So I grew up outside of Stockholm, and I moved to Stockholm really right after graduation from high school. I couldn't wait to get away from my hometown. It was small. And so in Stockholm is the capital of Sweden. It has about 1 million people. It was still too small for me. So what happened? By happenstance, I was invited by a friend of mine, Anders, to take a trip to India on a creative project. I was a photographer. I was really into photography. I went to photo school. I constantly took pictures, and he was a writer. And so together we traveled to India and did this creative project for a festival that was going to take place in Stockholm. That was an incredible experience. And it was really incredible to have the time really to sink into creative things like photography and writing. And so that in turn led to another happenstance. I met a woman there, and when you're in your early 20s, you become friends like so deep, and it almost felt like, oh my God, we have to do something together. So long story short, I ended up in New York with Christy, my friend, and we decided to take a road trip. And we did. We took a 3-week road trip. And at the end of it, I went back to New York, and I discovered that New York was really like the most creative, fertile ground for creativity. And since I had dabbled a bit, like in editorial and writing and taking pictures, I started to kind of look around for what I could do there.
On your road trip, where did you go?
Well, this is funny. We went from Connecticut to Key West. And the plan was that we would then go all across like the South to California. But we had a really crappy car. Like at one point, the stick shift like just came loose, and it was like full of adventures. And what I didn't mention before is that I actually met somebody in New York on my 3rd night there. Christy and I walked into a bar, and there was this fabulous stranger who I then proceeded to talk to on the phone, like for an hour every day, hours and hours from payphone. So wherever we went, we had to like find a payphone. And after 3 weeks, I said, I have to go check it out. So I went to New York, and long story short, again, I moved in and married this man, my husband, Danny, and we're still married today. So yeah, that was our road trip. It was not really what I had planned, but it worked out.
Oh, I love that. That is so cool. It seems like such the like hippie life. Like, oh, I went over to India. I did this project. It does definitely sound like the life of a creative. And then, I went on a road trip, and this road trip was 3 weeks. I'm sorry. Me personally, I
Yeah.
like to travel, but I've got limits on the amount of time that I'm away from like my home and my bed.
Yeah.
And um I couldn't imagine being in a car, like, and then like you being from a different country and then like coming to the US and seeing, wow, we're crazy over here. I mean, I don't know if you thought that. I don't know, but
I, yeah, I don't know about crazy. I always had this deep connection to the States somehow because I studied literature at university. I never graduated, but I was really interested in the US. Like I read all the books that women wrote in the 80s, like this deep feminism. I was connected to that. And so I knew a lot about the States, but I had never visited really. So I felt at home. New York, though, was a different animal because I felt like this big in a city of really tall buildings. So that threw me a little bit. But I also thought like for a creative person that was like me, it was a really fertile ground to like do all these things, work in photography. Eventually I started writing a travel column about New York. I took pictures. I sort of parlayed my experience into a job at national magazines as a photo researcher. And I love that word parlay, by the way, because it means to wager, to bet, to take a risk. And I think when I look at my life now, I think I've done that all of my life, even before I moved to New York. But it was a good match for that, to experience the creativity of the city at that time.
can you, well, okay, first, can we talk about like your beliefs around creativity and, what it brings in your life?
Well, as I said, my life has been one long string of opportunities. I really have not had a career in the sense that I never had a full-time job. I was never on staff, really. I was a freelancer, which is a form of entrepreneurship in my mind.
Mhm.
So I was a freelancer for all of my life, and creativity, you just had to think on your toes, or however you say it. But the creative thinking that I did was really from a piece of advice that I got from a wonderful woman. Her name is Aiperi Karabuda, and she was Swedish. We had known each other in Stockholm. I met with her in New York when I was this expat, all of a sudden living with a boyfriend on the Lower East Side. And she said, be like a sponge. Everybody you meet, soak it up and keep that contact. That was great advice. And so there was a lot of creativity that went into my early life in New York. And in general, I see creativity as a tool that you can choose. And I think that if you choose it wisely and you're brave about it and really honest about it, it can lead you to places that you want to be in. In my case, it led me to what I do today. I was an entrepreneur early on, and today I work with SNYDER. It was a fantastic agency with amazing people. So it's not really a philosophy. It's sort of more of an action point direction, if you wish.
And can you tell me a little bit about like what you do, or the listeners a little bit about what you do with Snyder?
Yeah, so SNYDER is an artist representation and creative production agency. I am now the CEO and founder, and I lead the company creatively, while my team members, who are all amazing women, they take care of clients. And so what we do is we sign artists, commercial artists, not painters or anything, but commercial artists that do things for companies like Netflix, Google, um, big companies like that, but also smaller companies that need artwork made for social media or for advertising or for animations that post online. So that's what SNYDER does. We have started doing a lot more animations. And in fact, I think it was yesterday, a series of animations that we did for Nick Jr. launched. That's just an amazing project that we had the fortune of being involved with. So we represent commercial artists to the advertising fields, to the design field, and to the editorial and publishing field in the US and in the UK.
Congratulations on that, by the
Oh,
way.
thank
That
you.
is awesome. And that's really exciting that, you never having like the traditional career have really built something so sustainable and so renowned, just, and it's not even, to me, it's not even that much about like the big names. It's just
Yeah.
the fact that you took something, you had an idea and you went after it and you kept going after it and you built it into what you've built it in.
Yeah. And, if you want, I can explain how this parlaying happened in this
Yeah.
particular field. So I was a photo researcher and photo editor for a long, long time. I had a series of really uninteresting jobs when I first arrived because I figured, what can I do? Well, I can work in photography. I have experience from Sweden. So I got a job that eventually parlayed into being a researcher at Time magazine. And so at the time, we're talking many, many years ago, I worked at Time. I then hopped over to Newsweek, Life, Fortune. I worked at InStyle. I worked at Vanity Fair for a stint. It was just really like this kind of hopping around. And then I started working by chance again, got an interview at CBS television, and I worked there in the photo department. Then I hopped over to HBO in the photo department. And I met a person there who said, you should really think about being an agent. An agent. I said, an agent? Oh, yeah, an agent for photographers. It's a really cool job. She had done it. And so I had contact with agents. They had sent me estimates for like big shoots for HBO, like that you use for advertising. So I kind of took that to heart and I said, oh, why not? Why shouldn't I do that? So I just parlayed my experience to becoming an agent for photographers. And so we're talking 2001 now. Eventually, that led to, again, by chance, that I met a very amazing illustrator. Her name is Stina Versen. She's Swedish, who wanted an agent in New York. And I took her on. That in turn parlayed into what SNYDER actually started out as. I had a smaller division called SNYDER and the Swedes, and we represented a lot of Scandinavian Swedish artists. That in turn got rebranded to SNYDER New York, and that in turn got branded to SNYDER, which we are now. And so we rebranded in January of this year. So you see how it's really a string of opportunities and creative thinking that led to where I ended up today.
I love that. Can you share, now there's a few questions that I have for you actually. So the first one, because I didn't even know there were agents for photographers. I had no idea.
Oh, there are many, many great agents for photographers for commercial work,
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense. It's just, I'm not in that field. I love photography. I'm not one, but I'm one of those people that I randomly ask people, hey, do you want me to take your picture? And I'm so big about like capturing the moment. And so I do I'm great with a camera phone. And my husband, he's a photographer in the Air Force. So I'm used to like that side of it. And all of the photographers I know just bootstrapping it really, and just doing their like mini shoots, but I never knew on the commercial side what that looked like. So I'm grateful for you to share that part of it with me. Two, like, what are some of the downfalls? So I guess that was more of a statement. So the real question is, what are some of the downfalls that you've experienced through your process?
Oh, Olivia, there are many, many downfalls. I want to say, part of my homemade philosophy is like, you have to fail to succeed. You really have to fail. Learn how to fail really quickly and bounce up again and start over. There is something like to be learned from every experience. So when I think about my path, I have failed many, many times. And you mentioned like sleeping in weird places and, going to India. If I only could tell you the places that I've been sleeping in my life while I was building my businesses. Um, but downfalls, I would say it was really tough after 9/11. That was a downfall. Business disappeared. I wasn't established enough, but eventually it picked up and I got a really huge job early on as a rep. I think downfalls for me has been I tried to do everything myself. Like I was a one-woman show. I never hired anybody in the early days. And that's not a good strategy. You should really hire people if you can afford it to help you with the stuff that you're not good at. But I did everything. Another downfall, I think, would be maybe overreaching and also being really hard on yourself. That's more of a advice, like in general in life. Like, don't be too hard on yourself because things may work out and you're always learning. So those are the things that come to mind when you ask me that.
Overreaching. Please explain what you mean by that.
Well, in my case, I started this photo repping business, and I can say this now because it worked out in the end. I thought that I could just start it without any experience, without any contacts. That was an overreach. I think in hindsight, what I could have done that would have been maybe easier on my peace of mind is like learn the business from the inside with somebody else that hired you to do the job. Instead, I just like hung out my shingle and said like, I'm repping. And it worked out. I'm saying that it worked out, but it was stressful. It was really stressful. So that was an overreach, I think.
That is absolutely fair. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Now you have an idea for a book, and we've been kind of dibbling and dabbling into it too, about how, you're parlaying your creativity. So I guess with some of those downfall times, how did you choose to dig deep and parlay your creativity to get you that next big thing?
Yeah, that's parlay is, as you can tell, one of my favorite words. And it really, again, it means like to wager, bet, take a chance. I think that I've lived my life taking chances all the time. Like I met my husband that way. I made I purchased a house that way. I started an agency that way. So the risk involved has always been worth it. I don't know really how, but parlay to me it means taking those risks and being brave about it, thinking kind of like what's the worst that could happen, and that means different things for different people, obviously. But for me, i had gone through hard times already before I started this kind of real risky starting businesses, and so I knew that I could handle that. Using my creativity is, to parlay one thing to another is often like based on impulses or ideas, like what would this look like, and then investigating that. So I think that's the best example that I can come up with, like how creativity and parlaying one thing into another, betting, taking risks, it's all sort of baked into that. And as a loose idea, I have started working on a book manuscript to talk about this, because I really, truly am an example of coming to New York with nothing. I had a boyfriend, but that was it. And just sort of, seeing opportunities and making something of them. And I realized that I'm extremely privileged because I had a stable background. I came from a house that had, education as a base of their core beliefs. I did go to university, never graduated, but I was privileged just by my mere existence in New York. But still, I think that being creative and parlaying things, that's always been in me somehow.
Privilege, I feel like everybody has some level that they can leverage their privilege.
Yeah.
It's just looking at it. Everybody's dealt with different cards,
Yeah.
and they have to use what they can to their advantage. That's if you feel like you don't have certain things, like, even I say, it was a privilege to grow up with not having a lot of money, because I know I
Oh
know what
yeah.
it's like. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I know how to live off less, like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. And in those days, being an expat in a tiny apartment on East Third Street in Manhattan with a boyfriend, I mean, it was, no money really. And that was a very good lesson. So about that. I do too. But this is a joke that I always sort of said to myself. It's like, well, I'm white and I have good teeth. That's really important in New York and in America. So with that, I kind of parlayed that to whatever it could give me. But it sounds kind of elitist, but it really isn't. It's just sort of a recognizing how this country works, and it works very differently in Sweden.
how does it work in Sweden?
Well, I think Swedes are used to like a sort of a level of comfort. Um, I thought sometimes, like, well, you can tell if you walk into a post office, that woman behind the counter that's helping you probably has an okay life with education, which is free in Sweden for her kids, with probably okay food at home and subsidized rents, perhaps. That was back then. I can't say that I really know Sweden now because I haven't lived there for many, many years, but it's a democratic system that was designed to take care of the masses and for everybody to be equal. I do not know if that's true anymore, but that's where I came from. A very democratic kind of everybody should be taken care of, and I have just without even knowing it, have implemented that in my company as well. I would like to say that it's a very democratic little place with a tyrant at the top, which is me.
Have you seen How to Become a Tyrant on Netflix?
No, I
Okay.
haven't. Should I?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
You might want to.
Oh, I should. I should. But joking aside, I'm not really a tyrant. I try to be inclusive, much as I can. And I think that all of the team members would actually agree. So that makes me very, very proud. I'm very happy. I'll check
So,
that out though. Yeah.
yeah. I watched it, and they talk about Fidel Castro. They talk about a few of the, like, but
Oh my
to
God.
me, Fidel is not nearly as bad as
Right.
some of these other people.
Yes. A few come to mind, right?
And yeah, like, but that's
Now I have to watch it. My man Fidel is in there. No, I'm just joking. Yeah.
I watched Cuba and the Cameraman last year. I watched something about the Cuba Libre story too. So I
Oh,
was learning a lot about Fidel Castro last year. And from the just different Netflix specials, and then I saw How to Be a Tyrant, and I just saw how he was portrayed to his people versus how he was portrayed to America, and just the different propaganda and everything. And do I agree with everything he did? No. Let me make that clear. But I can see how his people liked him,
yeah.
and I really don't believe he's as bad of a person because he believed in socialism as, we all may view
Yeah.
him as in America. I
Yeah.
think he was a very personable person, very
Oh,
charismatic.
he's supposed to be have been a super charming guy, like super charming and charismatic. Yeah. But the point is like choice, right? When in my career as a photo researcher and photo editor, I worked interestingly at the startup of People en Español, so People magazine in Spanish, and I worked with people that whose parents had fled Cuba because they seized all this property, much like Hemingway. You know, his property, his estate was seized as well by Castro's. So the point, I guess, is like choice. Did you have a choice? And at that time, I don't think people had choices. It was
No,
like,
people did not have
no,
choices. And
right.
that's so no, I do not agree with that aspect of it
Yeah,
either.
no,
Like
no,
I'm
exactly.
totally for a democratic system, you know, and what we got going on in this world right now is a little different. I think we're living in some very interesting times because it's like a lot of places they can't even have conversations like this. It's like if you're so this way, you got to be this way, and that's not the case. I believe that
Yeah,
people are layered and different, and you know, artwork has a way of showing that. Um, you know, and
yeah.
what type of photographers do you I know commercial photography,
Yeah. Well,
but
so right. So I'm not working with photographers anymore. It's all illustration and
okay.
animation. Yeah.
Oh, and that's a fun world.
Yeah. So at the time, though, I worked with, you know, European photographers, portraits, car work, anything really that we could do, interiors, like catalog. It was a big mixture of things.
Now, I have another question. This is kind of related to animation, and you know, what do you think about NFTs? And
Ah, yeah. So I know about them.
mhm.
I think it's a great chance for illustrators and artists to make some money. I am not an expert at NFTs at all. And in fact, at Snyder, we've discussed it. We've discussed whether we should get involved and do something in the agency about NFTs. And we've come to the conclusion that if we were to do something, it would have to be for a good cause, because it seems to me that it's mostly about making cash. And
Oh,
I'm not against it. When our artists do NFTs, they do it on their own. So it's nothing that we handle for them. What we do handle is when, say, an advertising agency comes to us for a client, say, Hyundai wants to do an NFT for a campaign. That's when we can get involved and ask our artists and handle that job. But I feel like it's a very different animal to what we are trying to do for our artists, which is sort of a long-term, sustainable career that will make them, you know, be able to work in the industry for a long time. It's like a slow build, more than a flash in the pan. There are some artists that are amazing at creating NFTs and have made that a huge career and made millions. But I still feel like it's problematic somehow. So therefore, we're not diving into it. We're dabbling in it, you could say.
I like to ask this question among creatives and people that might even be in the space simply because I don't know enough about NFTs or blockchain or any
Neither
of
do
that
I.
stuff.
No.
And I am always just trying to gain some other insight. And I'm just like, yeah, it does seem very much like a money grab. And there's
Yeah.
no NFT that I'm ever interested in because they all look so ugly to me. They're so blocky. And it's just like,
It's mystifying. It's really mystifying. I tend to agree, but then again, I can't say that I'm an expert at all. So I don't know enough about it. We have so much work coming in for our illustrators and animators in the sort of the quote unquote regular domain categories, like from advertising and editorial and publishing. So I don't really see the point of it. And I do think that if you're going to do it, then you have to really focus. So it's not a matter of like you have to choose one or the other, but it takes a lot of energy. What there's always that question of like, what's it for? Why? So I can't really answer that. And saying it for the third time, not an expert, but time will tell, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I just randomly, I like to
Yeah,
ask
yeah, I
questions,
get it.
but um I think that illustration and just how artificial intelligence is really becoming a lot more of a thing. How we love we just love these cartoon-esque types of things. And I see that being, and I very much still mainstream. So are
Yeah.
those, is that the type of like advertising?
Well, what we're exploring a little bit with a few teams on our roster is VR, so virtual reality. And
Yeah.
I'm more excited about that. AI, I think, is more of a non-visual discipline. So
Okay.
VR, we're very, very interested in. How can you make a virtual reality alongside the real reality? And some of our artists are sort of exploring that as well. I'm excited about that. It seems like there are very many places where it could be useful for people. It could be of help to people. Um, and so I'm a bit more excited about that than AI.
I'm probably misspoke when I'm saying that, because I know virtual reality with, the metaverse becoming a very
Yeah,
big thing in the upcoming years.
yeah,
Um, and how many of those things are going to have to be built, you know?
yeah.
Um, and I know Oculus is a thing now. Have you done anything in that realm? Um, any work in that realm yet?
Not yet, but this is also due to us building for the past 9 years. So we're just now, we actually signed a team. They're called Alkanoids, and they're based in Milan, that actually have worked on VR. And so we get asked from time to time, and our goal, like my goal for the company, is always to look to what's going to happen and be strong in 5 years alongside what we do traditionally, which is 2D illustration, 3D illustration, animation, etc. So VR is definitely on our radar in a major way. I would say that's our next big exploration.
As a creative, you seem very good at knowing what your focus is, and being able to fine tune that focus. And you even said, like, because it takes a lot of work. And I know that that comes from experience. Like when we were talking about NFTs, how that you've got to put a lot of effort into that. It's not that you can't do both, but you've got to put a lot of effort. So you understanding that things take effort, it takes your time. Um, how do you stay so focused? Or what are tips to stay focused as a creative?
Oh wow, such a great question. I I don't want to say that I don't know, because I do know. That comes from a place for me about creative impulses that pop up. Um, and it comes also from that space of like, why not? Let's try it. Let's see. Does this feel right? But it also comes from the intuition and the sort of the experience. So if you meld intuition and experience into one and add creativity, I don't know quite what to call it, but I can feel in the pit of my stomach if something feels right. And then if you add like the brand that we now are, we're much bigger brand now than we were, say, a year ago. And that's because we rebranded in January and launched a new website. It's the branding added to that mixture. Is it right for us? Is this Snyder? Is this what we should be projecting and doing? Some of it, like NFTs, are a great example, because no, that's not really what we're about. Whereas VR is what we're about. And so I don't really know how to else answer that question. But I think my experience and my failure has a lot to do with it, because I have tried things out. And along the way, you sort of develop this like sixth sense of, is this right? Should I do this? And I have done things, many things, and tried it out, even in recent years, like that never went anywhere. And that's okay too.
So what I got from this, I'm writing this down. It's
Yes.
know who you are, know how to feel, and know how to take action and stay on course.
Yes. And how do you do that? Well, that's a good question. I mean, I have 3 points that I usually talk about, like takeaways or points of advice. One is like, what's the worst that can happen? It's okay to fail quickly, fail fast, and then just like start over again without blaming yourself for failing. And the second one is, there's an amazing artist. Her name is Lisa Condon, and she's super famous and really amazing. I have a print on my wall that is from her, and it says, begin anyhow. Begin anyhow. And I've taken that to heart, because we think of things that we want to do, but we never begin. So begin anyhow is like one of my devices that I think about a lot. And then the third thing would be, for me, is like, it's never too late. It's never too late. I happen to have a father who started painting landscapes when he was 50, and he was self-taught, and he tried and tried and tried and worked really hard, and he really developed his skill for like color, form, and content in his later years. And he sort of persevered, and I see him as a huge success story in creativity. And I'm very inspired by not only his art that I have on my walls, but also from his pursuit of creativity, starting when he was around 50.
I love that. I love the takeaways, and it's, fail with a learner's mindset, because then you're not judging yourself. You're not beating yourself up. It's like, okay, where did I make a mistake? How can I do this better? All right, let's get up. Let's go again and begin anyhow. Oh, well, I don't feel, your feelings don't matter. You know what I mean? Not in that sense of like, if it's rejection, if it's bad, if it's against you, and it's never too late. If you woke up today, it's not too late. You just, and again, go back to 2. If you didn't get that one, just begin anyhow.
Begin again anyhow. Part 2. Yes. Anyway, so that's what I believe, and I love that you like that, because it means a lot to me.
Yeah, no, and I think it's something that is a really good takeaway in general. And I mean, it goes to your resiliency too, and how to really have that resiliency really set up in a concise way. So I greatly appreciate that. And is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I just want to say thank you to you, and for inviting me. This has been really amazing. A great conversation.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much, Olivia, and good luck with everything.
Yeah, thank you, Kristina. I'm looking forward to, I followed both of your pages. I'm looking forward to seeing all of your upcoming work and what your business how it continues to grow and everything like that. It's such an inspiration.
Oh, thank you. That's
thank
so great
you.
to hear. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Empowered Woman, Badass and Unfiltered podcast. If you found any value in this, please consider sharing and subscribing. Now go out and be a badass.